Welcome to the Pop Culture Diary. This is your go-to spot for trends, gossip, and throwbacks. I'm your host, Paige, and each week we're flipping through the pages of pop culture history. We'll talk about everything from neon-soaked 80s nights to the wild early days of the 2000s and beyond. You can expect the fashions, the music, the movies, the biggest news headlines, the scandals, and basically everything that had us talking, laughing, and obsessing. So grab some snacks, get cozy, and let's rewind the pages of time. All right, diary friends, here we go again. Welcome to 1981. This was a year that proves the 80s were not easing into anything. They were diving headfirst. We've got a brand new president moving into the White House, and before he can even hang up his coat, someone tries to take him out. Across the pond, the world tunes in for a royal wedding that looked like a fairy tale. If your fairy tales involve a dress with a train so long it needed its own postal code. But 1981 isn't just about the big headlines. It's the year music finally got a face, or a whole new channel, really, thanks to MTV. All of a sudden, how you looked was just as important as how you sounded. And while all of that was happening, arcades were full of people feeding quarters into a game about a little yellow circle with an eating problem. On the toy shelves, action heroes got muscles that made Arnold Schwarzenegger look underwhelming. And of course, the celebrity gossip pages, let's just say they were very busy this year. So grab your diary, get comfy, and let's flip the page to 1981. It's messy, loud, and it's gonna be fun. 1981 was a year where the world decided new decade, new chaos. Let's take a little trip through the news cycle that kept everyone talking, worrying, or just scratching their heads. Ronald Reagan becomes the 40th president on January 20th. The Gipper took the oath, and immediately America's vibe was like cowboy optimism meets Hollywood star power. It was like electing your grandfather, if your grandfather starred in Bedtime for Bonzo. Just minutes after Reagan took office, the 52 American hostages held in Iran for 444 days were released. The timing was suspiciously cinematic, like Iran was waiting for Reagan to say, "Action," before they let the curtain drop. Still, after more than a year of nightly news updates and yellow ribbons tied around trees, the return of the hostages felt like a Super Bowl win. Then came March. A man named John Hinckley Jr. decided the best way to impress Jodie Foster was by attempting to assassinate Reagan. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Reagan survived, and Hinckley became famous for all the wrong reasons. 3 other men were injured, including Press Secretary James Brady, who was left permanently disabled. The incident also gave Reagan a bizarre approval bump. Turns out nothing says leadership like surviving a gunshot and cracking jokes about it in the ER. In a much more positive milestone, Sandra Day O'Connor was sworn in as the first woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. Finally, the highest court in the land looked a little less like the world's most exclusive men's club. A genuinely historic moment. It was one of the few headlines of 1981 that didn't end in assassination attempt or crisis. Meanwhile, NASA gave us a peek into the future with the launch of Space Shuttle Columbia. It was the first reusable spacecraft mission, proving you could blast something into orbit and bring it back home in one piece, which honestly feels more impressive than any moon landing. Columbia's success was like the tech demo of the decade. The first step towards space travel being less sci-fi movie and more reality show pilot episode. But 1981 wasn't just about rockets. It was also the year that doctors began reporting rare cancers in young gay men, early signs of what we now know as the AIDS crisis. At the time, it was called, quote, the gay cancer, causing both medical confusion and the deep stigma that would really be the foundation for the epidemic for decades. This was the start of one of the most heartbreaking health crises in modern history. But in 1981, most people had no idea what was coming. On the other side of the Atlantic, the world stopped everything on July 29th to watch the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer. Over 750 million people tuned in, making it the most watched TV event in history. Diana's dress had a 25-foot train. Her face had a shy smile, and by the end of the day, she was a global icon. Forget presidents and astronauts. 1981 belonged to Lady Di. Back in the U.S., air traffic controllers went on strike in August, demanding better working conditions. Reagan responded by firing over 11,000 of them. In one swoop, he made it clear, you don't mess with the president unless you want to end up unemployed. Commercial flying was never quite the same, but hey, at least Reagan proved he knew how to swing the corporate axe. In October, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was assassinated by extremists during a military parade. Sadat had signed the Camp David peace accords just a few years earlier, earning a Nobel Prize. His murder was a harsh reminder that world peace doesn't come easy, and that standing up for diplomacy often makes you a target. So there you have it. 1981's headlines had historic firsts, pop culture pageantry, and more than a little gunfire. From Reagan dodging bullets to Diana walking down the aisle to Columbia touching the stars, the year was nothing if not dramatic. If the headlines were dramatic, the gossip columns were like theater. And let's be honest, half of what we remember about the early 80s is not politics or economics. It's who wore what, who kissed who, and who made the tabloids cry uncle. Let's start with the obvious, Princess Diana. If celebrity gossip was a stock market in 1981, Diana's value shot through the roof overnight. One minute, she's a shy 19-year-old kindergarten teacher. The next, she's a princess with more photographers in her face than actual wedding guests. The press couldn't get enough, from what she wore to how she smiled to the fact that her engagement ring wasn't even custom. A royal picking a catalog ring? Scandalous. The press called her Shy Di, which was ironic because she couldn't take a step without 100 flashbulbs popping in her face. Her every outfit became headline news. People wrote think pieces about how she waved, and behind the fairy tale wedding, where she walked down the aisle in that huge puffed up wedding dress with a 25-foot train, there was already a fairy tale crack. Charles was famously quoted before the engagement about being, quote, in love, whatever that means, end quote. Translation, the tabloids had a field day speculating about Camilla. Spoiler alert, they were not wrong. On the Broadway front, Patti LuPone was giving critics goosebumps as Evita and giving backstage crews migraines. Her reputation for being, let's say, direct was already taking shape. Gossip flew about her offstage intensity, and while some called it diva behavior, others called it passion. Either way, she was unforgettable, both on stage and in the rumor mill. Broadway insiders whispered, "Don't cross Patty," and the press loved every second of it. Over in Hollywood, the early 80s were prime time for blockbuster filmmaking. But Cannes Film Festival leaned extra artsy this year with appearances from Jack Nicholson, Jessica Lange, and Shaka Khan. Somewhere between cocktails and standing ovations, actors and musicians were deciding who would be the next serious artiste and who would just end up on the gossip pages. Jack Nicholson was Hollywood's unofficial mascot of mayhem. Cannes Film Festival in 1981 was practically his personal playground. He showed up with a grin that said, "I know something you don't," and sunglasses that said, "And I'm not telling." Add Jessica Lange into the mix with her rising star power and whispered flings, and you had gossip writers scribbling like mad just to keep up. While Reagan was dodging bullets and astronauts were floating in space, music was getting its own makeover. MTV was born on August 1st, 1981. At 12:01 a.m., the network launched with "Video Killed the Radio Star" by the Buggles. MTV was the real gossip machine. For the first time, musicians were not just sounds, they were visuals, fashion icons, gossip fodder. David Bowie didn't need the gossip columns. His videos were gossip columns. Madonna was just beginning her climb, and Debbie Harry of Blondie was the poster girl of cool, with people dissecting her every haircut and outfit. Suddenly, rock stars could not hide behind their records. Their cheekbones and fashion choices were now part of the package. And yes, that meant gossip mags had a whole new playground. Hair got bigger, pants got tighter, and suddenly everyone had a smoke machine in their garage. Oh, and let's not forget the Hollywood meets politics crossover. Ronald Reagan, being both a president and a former movie star, meant gossip columns were not just asking about foreign policy, they were asking who the Reagans invited to dinner, what Nancy wore, and how the First Lady's astrology obsession was running the calendar. Yes, Nancy really did rely on an astrologer. And yes, that was whispered about endlessly in 1981. The gossip pages also had their somber notes. The assassination of John Lennon in late 1980 was still dominating conversations in 1981. Paparazzi hounded Yoko Ono, dissected Lennon's last interviews, and asked tasteless questions about his legacy. Not even grief was safe from gossip. So, 1981, as I mentioned, was like theater. It was about royalty as soap opera, politics as Hollywood, and musicians as fashion models. The gossip rags were chock full, and they had no intention of losing momentum. Next up, fashion trends. We all know Lady Di stole the royal fashion show, but on the other end of the spectrum, women in the workplace were embracing the early stages of power dressing. Shoulder pads were still quietly padding their way into boardrooms, giving everyone that linebacker chic silhouette. The message was clear. Yes, I can balance this spreadsheet and tackle you if I need to. Designers like Giorgio Armani were pioneering chic, structured suits for women, creating a look that screamed authority with just enough style to keep it glam. Bands and pop stars started leaning into visual flair. Punk and new wave looks like neon colors, asymmetrical cuts, wild hair, eyeliner for everyone started spilling off stage and onto the streets. Fashion wasn't just clothes anymore. It was costume, attitude, and brand identity. Sunglasses got bigger, belts got wider, jewelry got louder. This was the dawn of the more is more era. If you had earrings that could brush your shoulders, you were doing it right. If your makeup did not look like it could be seen from space, were you even trying? Shows like Dynasty, which premiered in January of 1981, pushed high glam style straight into American living rooms. Viewers tuned in, not just for the scandal, but to see Joan Collins dripping in sequins, feathers, and enough diamonds to blind her co-stars under the studio lights. The drama wasn't just in the dialogue, it was in the shoulder pads, the gowns, and the hair that defied gravity. 1981 wasn't about playing it safe. It was about looking like the main character wherever you went. Whether you were getting married on live television in front of 750 million people, sitting behind a desk, or just heading to the grocery store. The bigger, shinier, puffier, or bolder, the better. All right, let's talk about toys and games in 1981. This was the year kids begged their parents for things that either glowed, beeped, or looked like they could beat up G.I. Joe. Let's start with the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. This was the toy launch of 1981. Mattel introduced He-Man action figures, and suddenly every living room had a tiny, plastic, muscle-bound warrior shouting, "By the power of Grayskull." He-Man was not just a toy. He was basically a steroid ad that you could play with. His supporting cast included Skeletor, who somehow managed to be both terrifying and fabulous with his purple hood and blue muscles. Kids loved it. Parents, not so much, once they realized they'd be buying 30 different figures, a giant castle, and a plastic battle cat that cost as much as a tank of gas. If there's one thing that truly sums up 1981, it's Pac-Man. Released in 1980 in Japan, by 1981 it had exploded in the US. Arcades were stuffed full of people guiding that little yellow pizza with a missing slice around mazes, chomping dots, and dodging ghosts. The game was so popular, it didn't just stay in arcades. There were Pac-Man board games, Pac-Man cereal, Pac-Man toys, and even Pac-Man cartoons. Basically, Pac-Man was the Kardashian of 1981. Everywhere, unavoidable, and merchandised within an inch of its life. Cabbage Patch Kids were not huge just yet. Their big boom would come in a couple of years, but 81 kids were still big on dolls, Hot Wheels, and good old Lego sets. Rubik's Cube, launched globally in 1980, was still melting brains everywhere, mostly because no one could actually solve it without peeling off the stickers. If you weren't playing Pac-Man in 81, you were probably trying your hand at Donkey Kong, which hit arcades that year. It introduced the world to a little character known as Jumpman, who you might know better today as Mario. Yep, the mustached plumber started out climbing ladders and dodging barrels thrown by a giant ape. Arcades were basically the TikTok of 81. Addictive, everywhere, and the reason kids begged their parents for quarters like their lives depended on it. While arcades got all of the attention, families were still gathering around board games like Monopoly, Clue, and Sorry. All classics that kept their place in 81, but new at-home electronic games were creeping in. Handheld LED games like Mattel Football were still around, and more kids were starting to dream of having a full console system in their living room instead of just chasing ghosts at the arcade. Toys and games in 1981 had one rule: go big or go neon. Whether you were mastering Eternia with He-Man, battling ghosts with Pac-Man, or peeling the stickers off your Rubik's Cube in frustration, there was no shortage of fun. Playtime was loud, colorful, and, let's be honest, a little bit weird. But that's the magic of the early 1980s. 1981 was a year when Hollywood was equal parts dazzling glamour and campy chaos, a mix of Oscar-worthy drama and box office bombs that people pretend they didn't see, but absolutely did. First up, the movies. Let's just say if you went to the theater in 1981, you were probably watching Harrison Ford crack a whip and run from a giant boulder in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was pure popcorn spectacle, the birth of Indiana Jones, and the reason archaeology majors briefly thought their lives were going to be adventurous, only to discover it's mostly about cataloging pottery shards in dusty basements. Still, Spielberg and Lucas delivered what was basically 2 hours of cinematic adrenaline. Nazis, snakes, explosions, and audiences couldn't get enough. Meanwhile, on the darker side, we had The Evil Dead. Sam Raimi's low-budget horror masterpiece that looked like it was held together with duct tape and gallons of fake blood, because it pretty much was. Despite the shaky camera work and effects that looked suspiciously like oatmeal and red food dye, it became an instant cult classic. Nothing says let's have a good time like demonic possession in a remote cabin. And speaking of demons, An American Werewolf in London had people questioning whether they'd ever trust a full moon again. Rick Baker's transformation effects were so groundbreaking that the Academy had to invent a brand new category: Best Makeup. Translation: werewolf hair and latex skin finally got the respect they deserved. But 1981 wasn't all blood and monsters. Chariots of Fire gave audiences something more refined, a British period piece about Olympic runners. It walked away with Best Picture at the Oscars, and more importantly, gave the world its iconic slow-motion beach running scene. To this day, people still use that music whenever they jog 50 feet and want to feel like an Olympian. On the lighter side, we had Author, starring Dudley Moore as a drunk millionaire who proved that if you were charming enough, you can get away with anything, even slurring your way through most of the dialogue. And if you were a kid in 81, chances are you dragged your parents to Superman 2. Christopher Reeve was back in the tights, Zod was demanding everyone kneel, and kids were realizing that yes, sequels really can be fun. Now let's flip over to TV. 1981 was the year networks really leaned into the comfort food of television. Sitcoms and soaps ruled the airwaves. Dynasty strutted onto screens that January, dripping with diamonds, shoulder pads, and enough backstabbing to keep America hooked. It was ABC's answer to Dallas, which had already made Who Shot JR a national obsession. Dynasty basically said, "Hold my martini and watch me throw it in your face." Meanwhile, daytime TV was pure drama. Luke and Laura's wedding on General Hospital wasn't just a soap opera event, it was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. 30 million people tuned in, making it the most watched hour in daytime TV history. To put that into perspective, that's basically the population of Canada. The ceremony was like the royal wedding of Port Charles, with just slightly fewer tiaras and way more hairspray. Comedy got a boost with Hill Street Blues, which debuted in '81 and redefined the police procedural. Instead of the squeaky clean case of the week formula, it gave viewers messy storylines, overlapping plots, and characters with flaws. Suddenly, cops were not just heroes, they were humans who yelled at each other in the squad room and forgot to shave. It set the stage for every gritty drama to come. So, in short, 1981's entertainment buffet gave us Nazis getting punched, werewolves sprouting hair in real time, soap opera weddings bigger than real weddings, and a brand new channel dedicated to watching men in eyeliner strum guitars. It was messy, it was glamorous, and it was unforgettable. 1981 was one of those years where technology really started stretching its legs, tripping over them, and then somehow sprinting into the future anyway. A mix of clunky plastic, flashing green text, and state-of-the-art machines that today could not outcompute your toaster. First up, the crown jewel, the IBM Personal Computer 5150, released in August of 1981. For the first time, IBM made a computer for the masses, and by masses, I mean anyone who had $1,565 to drop on a base model with 16K of memory. Yes, K. That's less than the average emoji-filled text message today. But back then, that was enough power to make businesses swoon and hobbyists faint with joy. The IBM PC used Microsoft's MS-DOS operating system, which meant you spent a lot of time staring at a black screen and typing cryptic commands like some kind of hacker in a Cold War spy movie. No icons, no mouse, no Candy Crush, just a blinking cursor daring you to figure out what the hell C:* symbol meant. And while IBM was convincing office managers they absolutely needed a computer, portable music was having a glow up. Sony's Walkman was still the must-have gadget in '81. Picture it. Teenagers with giant foam headphones, dramatically rewinding mixtapes with a pencil and feeling cooler than anyone else on the planet. The Walkman did not just change how people listen to music, it basically invented the concept of a soundtrack for your life. Nothing says main character energy like blasting Journey's Don't Stop Believin' on a cassette player the size of a brick. Speaking of bricks, mobile phones in 1981 were more gym workout than sleek accessory. The first commercially available mobile phone, the Motorola Dynatac 8000X, was still a couple of years away, but prototypes existed. Early adopters in '81 were basically lugging around car phones that required an actual car to function. Imagine trying to flirt on the phone while shouting over the sound of an idling engine. Smooth. Now, let's get into the games. Video games were exploding. As we talked about, the arcade was the place to be. 1981 gave us a little gem called Donkey Kong, where a plumber named Mario, yes, that Mario, had to rescue his girlfriend from a barrel-throwing gorilla. Fun fact, Nintendo originally wanted Popeye as the star, but licensing fell through. So instead of spinach, we got mushrooms, princesses, and a billion-dollar empire. Probably the best copyright problem in history. Home gaming also got an upgrade. The ColecoVision was announced in 1981, though it wouldn't hit shelves until '82, promising arcade-quality graphics in your living room. This was revolutionary because it meant you didn't have to leave the house to play games. Although, to be fair, it still meant fighting with your siblings over who got the joystick and blowing into cartridges when they inevitably glitched. And for photography fans, 1981 marked the debut of the Sony Mavica, the first consumer still video camera, aka the great-great-grandfather of your iPhone camera. It recorded images onto mini floppy disks. Imagine telling someone today that to send a selfie, you had to mail them a literal disc. Slide into my floppy drive doesn't have the same ring to it. Meanwhile, in the world of video entertainment, Laserdiscs were trying their hardest to look futuristic. These dinner plate-sized discs looked like the future but played like the past. They were expensive, bulky, and required special players, which meant most people stuck to their trusty VHS tapes. The format war was brewing, and spoiler alert, Laserdisc lost hard. Oh, and if you were rich enough, you could impress your neighbors with a VCR, a device so coveted in '81 that families would practically plan movie nights around it. Imagine renting Raiders of the Lost Ark and knowing you could pause Harrison Ford mid-whip. Magic. So yeah, tech in 1981 was equal parts groundbreaking and laughably primitive. Computers with less power than your fridge magnet, phones that lived in cars, cameras that ate floppy disks, and video games that introduced the world's most famous plumber. Looking back, it's easy to laugh, but in the moment, this was the bleeding edge. If 1980 cracked open the door on the MTV era, 1981 barged in and made itself comfortable. But outside of music videos, the year's charts, albums, and celebrity drama were pure entertainment gold. Let's start with the charts. '81 was ruled by arena rock, synth pop, and ballads so powerful they could knock over your boombox. Journey dropped Escape, giving us Don't Stop Believin', the karaoke anthem that refuses to die to this day. If you've ever found yourself belting that song in a dive bar at 2 a.m., you have 1981 to thank. Meanwhile, Phil Collins officially stepped into his solo era with Face Value, featuring In the Air Tonight. The song's drum break became so iconic it's practically a rite of passage to air drum along. Legend has it the track was inspired by Phil Collins' crumbling marriage, proving once again that heartbreak makes for killer music. Speaking of heartbreak, Stevie Nicks was flying high on her solo debut, Belladonna. The witchy queen of rock gave us Edge of 17. Yes, the white-winged dove song. Her mystical image, flowing shawls, and rumored drug use made her a tabloid magnet. Toss in whispers of ongoing Fleetwood Mac drama and her on-again, off-again fling with Don Henley of the Eagles, and you've got gossip writers foaming at the mouth. Not to be outdone, the Rolling Stones were busy reminding everyone they weren't done yet with Tattoo You. The single Start Me Up would go on to become a stadium anthem and Microsoft's theme song decades later. Mick Jagger also had the side hustle of being photographed with every it girl alive, which only fueled the image of him as rock's eternal playboy. Across the pond, Duran Duran burst on the scene with their self-titled debut album, combining new wave sound with smoldering good looks. They didn't just have fans, they had fangirls. By the end of the year, they were unofficially crowned the new heartthrobs of the British Invasion 2.0. Cue the shrieking teenagers and the "are they actually musicians or just pretty boys" debates. Then you had Sheena Easton, who became America's sweetheart almost overnight with Morning Train, 9 to 5. Innocent image, catchy song, everyone's mom approved. But behind the scenes, Prince took notice. By the mid-'80s, she'd be in the Purple One's orbit, giving tabloid writers plenty of ink to spill. And let's not forget Diana Ross, who was living her best disco diva meets pop goddess life with Endless Love, her duet with Lionel Richie. The song was massive, the kind of ballad that made couples slow dance at weddings for decades. Diana Ross was also sparking rumors with her high-profile social life, including speculation about her relationship with Gene Simmons of Kiss. Imagine that crossover. Motown glamour meets glam rock face paint. Behind the glitter, though, the music scene was shifting. Punk's chaos gave way to new wave polish. Bands like the Go-Go's released Beauty and the Beat, the first album by an all-female band who wrote their own songs to hit #1 on the Billboard chart. They were playful, punky, and partied harder than most of their male peers, which tabloids ate up. Let's just say their behind-the-scenes antics made Almost Famous look tame. And of course, rock drama was eternal. Ozzy Osbourne made headlines not just for leaving Black Sabbath, but for biting the heads off 2 live doves at a CBS Records meeting in 1981. This was before the bat incident in 1982. Totally normal workplace behavior. Debbie Harry and Blondie kept disco and punk married with the tide as high, cementing Debbie Harry as both a music and fashion icon. And rumors swirled around Elton John's love life as he navigated his career post-70s superstardom. Let's go through the top 10 singles of 1981, the Billboard Year-End Hot 100. Coming in at #1, Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Carnes. The raspy voice anthem about the ultimate femme fatale absolutely dominated the year. Fun fact, Kim Carnes wasn't even the first to record it, but she made it unforgettable. Coming in at #2, Endless Love by Diana Ross and Lionel Richie, the wedding song of the early 80s. This duet was so big it turned Lionel Richie into a full-blown solo star. #3 was Lady by Kenny Rogers, written by Lionel Richie. So yeah, 1981 was basically his year. #4, Just Like Starting Over by John Lennon. Tragically, his death in December of 1980 made this track bittersweet. Coming in at #5 was Jessie's Girl by Rick Springfield, the teen crush anthem of all time. Springfield even won a Grammy for it. And yes, Jessie was based on a real person. Number 6, Celebration by Kool and the Gang. Still a party playlist essential. If you've ever been forced onto a dance floor at a wedding, blame this song. Number 7, Kiss on My List by Daryl Hall and John Oates. The duo was unstoppable in the early 80s, and this sugary pop track put them at the top of the charts. Coming in at number 8, I Love a Rainy Night by Eddie Rabbitt, a little country pop crossover magic that soaked up the airwaves. Coming in at number 9, 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton, the working woman's anthem that was as sassy as it was catchy. Dolly owned both the movie and the charts. And coming in at number 10, Keep On Loving You by REO Speedwagon. Arena rock perfection. Slow build, big chorus, lighter waving power ballad vibes. Now let's go through the Billboard year-end top 10 albums of 1981. Coming in at number 1, Double Fantasy by John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Shot to the top after Lennon's murder. It's a strange mix of optimism and tragedy in hindsight. Number 2, High Infidelity by REO Speedwagon. Packed with its hits like Keep On Loving You and Take It on the Run, it basically soundtracked Middle America in 1981. Coming in at number 3, Paradise Theater by Styx. Concept rock about a Chicago theater's glory days, proving progressive rock could still chart big. Number 4, Back in Black by AC/DC. Released in 1980, but still crushing it in 1981. Pure riff-driven perfection and a tribute to their late singer, Bon Scott. Number 5, Glass Houses by Billy Joel. Billy Joel went rockier here, and it worked. It's still rock and roll to me, kept him on top. Coming in at number 6, Gaucho by Steely Dan. Slick jazz rock perfection, a critic's favorite, even if some listeners didn't get it. Number 7, The Game by Queen. Thanks to Another One Bites the Dust and Crazy Little Thing Called Love, this was Queen's U.S. chart peak. Coming in at number 8, Against the Wind by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. The album that made Bob Seger a household name, Heartland rock at its peak. Number 9, Zenyatta Mandata by The Police. Features Don't Stand So Close to Me and Dee-da-doo-doo, Dee-da-da-da. Sting and crew were building towards superstardom. Coming in at number 10, Crimes of Passion by Pat Benatar. With Hit Me With Your Best Shot, Pat cemented herself as the queen of rock radio. By year's end, it was clear 1981 wasn't just about the launch of MTV. The music itself was wild, emotional, experimental, and often tangled up in deliciously messy personal lives. Between Stevie Nicks' witchy love triangles, Mick Jagger's endless conquests, and Ozzy's bird buffet, the tabloids had no shortage of copy, and the music, it's still on your playlist today. That's it for today's trip through the Pop Culture Diary. Thanks for tuning in and taking a trip back in time for a hit of nostalgia with me. Don't forget to follow the podcast wherever you get your shows, rate, review, and keep an eye out for the podcast on social media over on Instagram at ThePopCultureDiary Podcast, Twitter at PopCultDiaryPod, Tumblr at The Pop Culture Diary Podcast, and the Facebook page, The Pop Culture Diary, for more pop culture fun, extras, and behind-the-scenes madness. Until next time, everyone take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.